Ronald Stevens recently got a job as a delivery person at the BII Postal Company in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. When Ronald first applied for the job, he thought things would be easy, and it was. But the days were long and tiring, and a bit laborious when he had to carry heavy packages from the place he parked the delivery truck all the way to the front door of the recipient. Today, however, seemed to be a rather easy day. Almost all the packages he was to deliver by 8 were pretty small, except for one box that was supposed to be delivered to an Elizabeth Maridu who lived in Morsel, which Ronald saved for last. By 5 p.m., Ronald had completed all the small deliveries and headed off to his last destination. The address of Elizabeth Maridu was tucked away into the woods far from the busy part of town near the lakeside. Morsel wasn't actually too far from Sheboygan, but the route to the specific address had to be reached through a circular, curved, twisted long road, all the way to the end of town. Though the area was beautiful and quiet, to live in a place like this must have been quite boring and a hassle when it came to driving in and out of town. It was after half an hour that Ronald reached the gates of Elizabeth Maridu's little house. The house was small, but the front and the backyard that surrounded it was quite spacious. Ronald spotted a mailbox by the gate, but he was unsure whether to keep the box out in the open. In a place like this, a wild animal might rip open the box or even flee with it. Ronald creaked open the gates and walked inside with the box. The curtains to every window were drawn, and Ronald started to doubt if anyone was even home. He rang the bell 3 times before he started searching for a place to leave the box behind with the note. Just then, a woman opened the door. Ronald cleared his throat and asked, "Mrs. Elizabeth Maridu?" "Yes, I am Elizabeth Maridu." Ronald was a bit taken aback at the large scar the woman had on her face. He tried not to stare and took out the receipt. However, the woman kept staring at him, and Ronald couldn't help but look back. "Miss, would you please sign your name here?" "Are you new to the job?" Yes, miss. I started a while back." "You remind me of someone I used to know. If you wouldn't mind, could I just ask you of a favor?" Ronald looked at his watch. There was still an hour to his shift, but he had to get going to drop off the van in time. However, out of politeness, Ronald said, "Sure, how can I help you?" "You see, I've become quite old. I have a lot of difficulty carrying these boxes around the house. Would you please bring it inside for me?" "No problem. Where would you like me to put it?" "Thank you so much. It's not often you meet a nice young fellow like you. That's why I asked you if you were new. The old delivery boy literally used to throw the boxes off his van and leave in a hurry as if he had seen a ghost." "Well, I assure you that is against our company's policies. But what can I say, sometimes the workers are just not dedicated enough." The woman suddenly walked into the hallway, leaving Ronald in the living room by himself. She came back after 5 minutes with some tea and cookies. "Please, sit down. I rarely have any guests. It would mean a lot to me if you stay just for a while." "Mrs. Maridu, Ronald didn't know what to say. He felt very awkward, but at the same time he felt bad for the lonely woman. She seemed desperate for some company. He smiled and sat down on the sofa. "Please, don't mind the mess. I live here all on my own. It's hard to even prepare food for myself, let alone other things," the woman said as she poured Ronald a cup of tea and placed it in his hands. She then sat down and ushered Ronald to enjoy his drink. "You see, in this box that you're carrying contains a security camera. I've had to order one so I can keep this property on surveillance from my new tablet, but I'm still figuring out how to use it. Sometimes I hear strange noises around here, like crying and yelling, and sometimes my pets try to run loose. It's hard to get them back on their leash." "I see. This is such a remote place. Don't you have any children or anyone to take care of you?" "No, I don't have anyone. It's become quite the issue these days. I don't know how to install these technical things. I'll have to wait until I get help over here again. It might take days. You wouldn't mind... Oh, leave it. I don't want to burden you. You've done so much for me already. You must be exhausted. No, it's all right. I'll be out in a while anyway, and you won't have any visitors for long, I suppose. I wouldn't mind helping out. Really? Thank you so much. Would you please install these cameras for me? I'd be able to sleep in peace tonight. Ronald was feeling a little drowsy. He had a long day, and now the clock was ticking over 16 hours of being awake. This woman had been so kind to him, he couldn't say no. There were 4 cameras. He installed the first and the second in front of the gate and at the front door. As Ronald was installing the camera at the back door, he heard a thumping noise from the backyard. He turned to realize it was the doors of the shed far in the distance. Mrs. Maridu smiled and said, "I need the last one set up in the basement." "In the basement? Why there?" "Sometimes I keep my pets there. I have a lot of them. You see, I can't keep all of them out in the open. They can make a lot of noise. You hear that, don't you? They're in the shed right now, just playing around. I'll show you to the basement." Mrs. Maridu stayed at the top of the stairs, watching the footage on her tablet while Ronald opened the basement door and stepped inside. The room was empty, except for a dog food bowl and some untied leashes. Ronald held his forehead. He was developing a sudden headache. He could care less about anything right now. He just wanted to go home. He set up the camera and waved into it as he called out to Mrs. Maridu. "Is it working, Mrs. Maridu?" Suddenly, the door to the basement shut closed, and Ronald heard a beeping noise. He then heard Mrs. Maridu's voice on the other side. "Working just perfect. The young woman who came here just last week installed these high-security locks. They've been quite useful. I can see you clearly, Ronald." Ronald furrowed his brows, hearing Mrs. Maridu on the other side. How did she get down here so quickly? "Excuse me?" Mrs. Maridu opened the door, he said, as he tried to pull on the knob. Mrs. Maridu laughed menacingly. "There's no way you can escape, Ronald." Ronald couldn't understand what was going on. Was this woman crazy? He should have known. Her innocence was too good to be true. "There's no use of trying. The door has been sealed. But don't worry. I'll come by tomorrow with some delicious cookies and tea. They were nice, weren't they? You must feel quite relaxed. Why don't you take a nap?" Ronald banged on the door, feeling sick. His head started to spin before everything went black, and Ronald fainted. Mrs. Maridu ran back upstairs laughing. Old woman. These fools are so easy to trap. Their underestimation keeps them right off guard where I need them. Oops, what's that? Looks like another one is trying to escape. Oh, these pets can be quite the nuisance. How can you do this to us after what you yourself have suffered? You've become crazy. You belong in an asylum. This is injustice. Let us go. Mrs. Maridu ushered her pets with her hand. All right. No need to fuss. I know you all have been waiting for another playmate. I've got good news for you. Tomorrow, another friend will be joining you all. Mrs. Maridu rechecked all the chains before locking the shed again. She returned to her little home after a long day and sat by the window. She stared at her reflection and sighed. I'll never forget those days. But I don't blame you. I know why you did what you did. This is very satisfying, getting to dictate your power over people. I cried when they gave you a life sentence, but don't worry. I'll keep up your legacy. I won't let you down. They rumored you kidnapped 23, and I'm only 3 away from 50. Elizabeth Maridu had a rather long life story. She was born and grew up in Wisconsin. She had loving parents, playful siblings, and numerous friends she always had fun with. But it was one day that everything in her life went from perfect to a miserable mess. When she was kidnapped by a man named Jack Edison. He was a deranged, psychotic man. He not only kept Elizabeth captive, but many others. Elizabeth was victim to his cruel treatment. For years on end, entrapped in a small dark room. Fortunately for her, she survived until Edison was caught in his crime, and she, along with many others, were rescued from captivity. Elizabeth was paid compensation from Edison's family members. She was advised to receive care at a rehabilitation center before she could return to her usual life. Though doctors said she was absolutely healthy, Elizabeth's friends and family could say this experience of her life had affected her tremendously. With the money she received, Elizabeth bought this small home in this remote area where she isolated herself from everyone. She chose to stay the way she had for all these years in captivity. People thought it was strange, people thought she needed help, but Elizabeth loved the feeling of empowerment she had now. In all those years of loneliness, in that dark room, tied, chained, and tortured, she spent day and night pondering on how one could be so cruel. But Elizabeth came to a rather different perspective. She understood the perpetrator. She wished she was in his place. And now, she was, living a life more successful than that of Jack Edison. Or so it seemed to be in her mind. Perhaps the definition of success varies from person to person. Click on the subscribe button and check out more awesome videos on our channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon because you know it's interesting.